Most have been carried out in northern Iraq. David Tafuri served as a State Department official for the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. And David, you just returned from Kurdistan in Iraq recently. Give us an idea of what you heard from the Peshmerga forces there.
Sure. So we were in Kurdistan last week, and this was my fourth trip there since ISIS invaded in June. It was a very good trip. We toured the front lines. We were in Dahuk, we were in Erbil, and some other areas, including also the Mosul Dam, which the Peshmerga forces recently took back from ISIS. Spirits are very high among the Peshmerga forces. They've had successes recently, and they feel very confident that they can defeat ISIS on the ground. They're very grateful for the support from the U.S. and the other coalition countries, especially for the airstrikes. However, the Kurdish forces do desperately need more modern equipment, they need heavier weapons, and they need armored vehicles. And they're hoping to receive those from the U.S. and the other coalition countries.
They are confident. Based on what you saw, are you confident as well?
Well, I'm confident that they have the determination and they have the number of forces that they need to defeat ISIS in northern Iraq. But ISIS still poses a very significant threat. And what is in question is whether they're going to receive the level of support that they need to defeat ISIS in the short term. And I think that's very important. If the Kurdish forces... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, what surprised you about this trip?
Well, you know, as I mentioned, this is my fourth trip. So I've been there since ISIS invaded. I would say that everything different in Iraq from how it was before ISIS invaded. And Iraq is more divided as a result of the ISIS invasion. Take the Kurdish region. It's now completely separated from the rest of Iraq because of ISIS. They have ISIS along their entire 650-mile border. Look at Baghdad. We have a new government in Baghdad. That's a very important step. But the Iraqi security forces are really still in disarray. They fled northern Iraq. They're struggling to fight ISIS in southern Iraq. They are fighting ISIS, but the Shiite militias, which are also being guided out of Baghdad, are doing a lot of the fighting as well. And I think that is a sign that the Iraqi security forces are not what they used to be, and they cannot alone defeat ISIS in southern Iraq. They need a lot of help, a lot of training, and a lot of support, and that's going to take a little while.
Well, you know that in this country there are plenty of people who have been saying that unless the U.S. and other countries put boots on the ground, they can't win this fight against ISIL. Based on what you saw, you think that's right?
I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think that the Kurdish forces, which are much larger in numbers than ISIS, and the Iraqi security forces and the other fighting groups, including the Shiite militias, they certainly have the number of fighters they need to defeat ISIS on the ground. If they're given the right amount of support, continued airstrikes by the coalition countries, some additional training, heavier weapons, armored vehicles, I believe they probably can defeat ISIS without the U.S. and other coalition countries having to put boots on the ground. However, if we don't give them that support very quickly, then more likely in the longer term, we will have to put boots on the ground.
David, it's good to see you. Thanks for sharing your story. You'll talk to us again the next time you go back.